Next up, we're going to have a look at setting hotkeys within Rekordbox. Now, hotkeys are basically points in the track that you can jump to and it will start playing. Now, within the Rekordbox software, we have up to 8 of these hotkeys, but depending on which version and which piece of Pioneer equipment that you're playing on, you might have all 8 or you might have less. So if you're playing on an older piece of Pioneer equipment, you might have just 4 hotkeys or maybe even just 3, but you have access to set up to 8 on here and they will work with the latest Pioneer equipment. Now, the easiest way of setting these hotkey points is with quantization enabled, because that means these hotkeys stick to the grid. However, if you want to set them off the grid, then you can turn quantization off for that. Now, there's 2 different methods in which we can set these hotkeys. We can jump to different parts of the track and maybe we want to put a hotkey when the beat comes in here. I can drag the waveform to that beat and then hit the hotkey button down here. That will then put a hotkey in on that point. As you can see, it's lit up with a green A. Now we can also set these while the track is playing. Now we can hit these hotkeys at any point and jump straight to those bits. Now we can also put a loop on a hotkey as well. So when we hit that hotkey, it'll go to that point in the track and automatically start looping. And it's really easy to do. All we need to do is set our loop within the track, then hit the hotkey button. We can see this hotkey button looks instantly different. It's a different color and it has the loop icon there. So whenever we hit that hotkey, it'll automatically go into that loop. And we can exit that loop in just a normal way that we'd exit a loop. Now we also have the ability to color up these hotkeys in different colors. The defaults are green for a normal hotkey and orange for a looped one, but we can right click on here and set it as a different color if we want to. This is totally up to you which colors you use, whatever makes the most sense to you. And if we go over to the hotkey panel on the right hand side here, we can also name up these hotkeys. We can click just to the right here and it allows us to put in a name for that hotkey. These labels are mostly used for Rekordbox, but depending on the Pioneer hardware you have, you might see this displayed as well. And finally, to get rid of any of these hotkeys, you just hit the X towards the right of the hotkey. That will remove it from there, or you can do it from the bottom bar here just by hitting the X here. Now, if you're liking this course and always wanted to make your own DJ edits, bootlegs and remixes for your sets, then you might be interested in another course that I've done. I've got a complete beginner's guide to Ableton aimed at DJs wanting to make their own edits. I'll teach you Ableton from scratch and I'll teach you just the skills that you need to know when you need to know them, so you're not overwhelmed by it all. I've had some amazing reviews from over 400 students that have already taken the course. Check out the link at the top of this video or in the description for more information. Next up, we're going to have a look at memory cues, also called memory points. They're very similar to hotkeys, but instead of jumping to the part of the track and automatically playing, they jump to the part of the track and stop. This allows you to kind of find your starting point within a track. This is especially useful if you want to start the track from a different point. Say, for example, sometimes you want to start the track from the very start, but then again, sometimes you want to start it from maybe a minute in or a minute and a half in. You can actually set a memory point to then skip to this to have it as your new starting point. Now, setting memory points is slightly different to hotkeys. It's not quite as easy, but it doesn't take too long to do at all. First off, you need to find where you want to put your memory cue in. So let's go to the very start of the song here. And I'll scroll to the very start of this track. Then what I'll do is I'll hit the cue button. That moves the cue down the bottom here. You can see the orange arrow here. And then I can hit the memory button here. If I go to the memory tab here, we can see that's put a point in there. Now, say, for example, I want to put another memory point within here. Say when the beat comes in. Again, I'm going to hit the Q here to move it to this point, and then I'll hit the memory button again. And then let's put another memory point in here. Again, I'll hit the Q button, then I'll hit memory. And we can see that we now have 3 memory cues within here. One at the very start of the track, one about 30 seconds in, and another one about 1 minute 30 in. And we can actually jump between these by hitting the left and right arrow here. So I can choose the part of the song that I want to start from. Now these buttons can also be found on most Pioneer hardware as well, so you can do exactly the same thing. Once you've set the memory points within the Rekordbox, you can use the left and right arrow on the Pioneer player to get to those memory points. Now deleting memory points is very similar to deleting hotkey points. On the memory list here, we can actually just hit these X marks here and that will remove that memory point, or we can move to the memory point here and then click the X here. And much like the hotkeys, we can also put a loop on a memory cue as well, and it's done in very much a similar way. So first of all, I'm going to put my cue point in. So I'll hit the cue button. Then I'll put a loop in on 4 beats, for example. And I'll hit cue here just to stop that playing. And then I'll hit the memory button to put that into memory. Now we can see we have our memory point here, and it's got a little icon here just to let us know that that's a loop. And now if I put another memory point a bit earlier on in the track, say for example here, I'll hit Q, put another memory point in there, and we can now jump between these two. So at the moment, nothing is looping, but if I go to the next memory point, which is a loop one, the loop will automatically start. But as you noticed, because it's a memory cue, it doesn't automatically start. But when we hit play, it will go into that loop. So which is the best to use, hot cues or memory points? Well, it's totally up to you, whichever works the best for you. If you prefer to hit one of the hot cues and it goes straight to that and start playing, then use the hot cues. If you like to start the track from different points, but don't want it to play instantaneously, then just use the memory cues. There is no bad way of doing it, it's whatever makes the most amount of sense to you. And you can also use hot cues and memory cues for different things. For example, some DJs use the hot cues and memory cues as ways of indicating when certain things start and when certain things stop within a track. Say, for example, you are mixing a track and the beat comes in about here. Well, I could put a hot cue in here, and this would then indicate when that track is coming in. For example, the beats are coming in. So if I'm mixing it in and I'm hearing it playing back, then I can actually see that hot cue coming up. And we could also put a hot cue at the end, for example. Maybe this is when the beat starts filtering out and we can start mixing on our next track. Well, I could put a hot cue in just here, just to let me know that. Maybe I'll put my last hot cue in there and that will show up within the track. And then I know that that's the last point of the track and I can start mixing out from there. So rather than using the hot cues to jump between different parts in the track, I'm actually just using them as flags so I know when to mix in and when to mix out. So have a play around with the hot cues and the memory cues and see which works best for you, whether it's to do with performance and you want to jump between different parts of the track, or whether you just want to use them as flags to know when to mix in and mix out. It's totally up to you, and you can use it in whichever way you want.